Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Faculty Forum, Navigating Undergraduate Research Ecosystem at Brown. I am Oluduro Timi Adetunji, Associate Dean of the College for Undergraduate Research and Inclusive Science, and the Executive Producer of the Science Cartoon, or SciTunes. Undergraduate research is an high-impact educational practice that helps to strengthen and advance our student overall undergraduate education as they develop critical skills needed for future careers. Brown offers unmatched transformational opportunities for students to undertake research, internship, and engage scholarship locally and globally. Students are engaged in research within the curriculum or through co-curricular learning opportunities. The examples are boundless. Many students take advantage of their Sprint Undergraduate Teaching and Research Award, or UTRAS, to conduct incredibly interesting work in collaboration with faculty mentors. Undergraduate research projects are also supported through the Royce Fellowship, the Voice Undergraduate Research Fellowship, and the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship, among others. Students can also apply for funding to support their own initiated research projects through the Research at Brown grant. Furthermore, through the SciTunes program, students have access to resources such as What is Research SciTunes, an animated video that introduces students to the research process. And I'm just going to play a little bit of that video before I continue my remark.
What comes to mind when you think about research? Probably a laboratory with test tubes, microscopes, and scientists wearing white lab coats. This setup is ideal for researchers in some disciplines, such as virologists studying viral infections, physicists developing new electronic devices, or chemists creating new materials. Other possibilities, such as someone digging through historical archives or someone distributing surveys about consumer preferences, may also come to mind. That's research too.
Many research projects conducted through these co-curricular opportunities accumulate into thesis projects. Some students also contribute to the development of a new course or the revision of an existing course through their involvement in curriculum development research projects. Through undergraduate research, students are engaged in research projects to deepen the exploration of their own academic curiosities that might intersect with their professors' research interest. 3 faculty colleagues who have mentored undergraduate research, students in research, are here to provide some insight and guidance on the undergraduate research ecosystem at Brown. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the faculty panelists so that they can join me on the stage. Laura Snyder, Senior Lecturer in Education and the lead faculty member in the English Masters of Arts in Teaching program. Laura's research focuses on humanities curriculum development. The Humanities Reimagined project seeks to intentionally diversify the voices and stories in the high school curriculum by creating open source educational material that feature contemporary literature and primary sources. Nicole Ganzal Van Cleef, Associate Professor in the Department of Sociology. Professor Gonzala Van Cleef's research focuses on the equitability of laws, the creation of racial meaning, and the consumer experience of criminal justice institutions. She is also an award-winning author of the book Crook County, and she has provided legal commentary on the criminal justice system for MSNBC, NBC, News, CNN, NPR, and the New York Times. Baylor Fox Kemper, Professor of Arts, Environmental Science, planetary sciences, Professor Forskamper research focuses on the study of physics of the ocean and how ocean fits into the Earth climate system using climate models. Baylor was a coordinating lead author of the Ocean Cryosphere and Sea Level Change chapter of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, 6th Assessment Physical Science Basis Report. He is also a co-chair of the Hard Science Modeling and Observation Core project of the World Climate Research Program. Join me once again in welcoming them. All right, so welcome again. So I will ask them a couple of questions, then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. So the first question to the panelists is, could you share your research expertise and speak about the ways you have engaged undergraduate students as collaborators in your research?
Would you like me to start?
Yeah, Laura, please.
Hello, everyone. So the project that I'm working with undergraduate researchers on is called Humanities Reimagined. And in that project, students are helping me curate curriculum for the high school literature and history classrooms. And so they're doing a wide variety of tasks with me. First and foremost, they're reading literature really carefully and thinking about examining that literature, looking in particular for background knowledge that students might need, say if there might be historical background knowledge, contemporary connections to various novels, or allusions that students might not understand. And so with that understanding of the literature, then they're working with me to and the librarians here at Brown and the curators here in special collections to locate materials, text sets that can be situated around the literature to provide more access, more engagement for students, and can provide multiple perspectives and diversity. So mainly I'm looking at contemporary literature that isn't yet in the English curriculum. Many of the students who are attracted to work on my project are students who say that their high school curriculum didn't adequately reflect them. Some of the things they're doing with me, in addition to archival research, data management and organization, conference proposals, working on grant proposals, and additionally, they're doing writing and editing with me, and we're creating ebooks of curriculum that we present to teachers. So they also run focus groups with teachers. And then lastly, they attend the summer high school that we hold here at Brown for Providence Youth. And they watch the curriculum in action the first time. And then they help me iterate and revise that to make it better so it could be distributed to other teachers outside of this area.
Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Parents, welcome. This is so exciting to see you all. I have to say that by the time I see your children in my class, they are these amazing, fully formed adults, and I realize, like, as a parent now, how much worry, work, and painstaking love it takes to get them here. So if you're here, students, make sure you give those hugs and all the appreciation. You know, I started as an undergraduate doing research at Northwestern, but it was more of a fend for yourself model. And we had to pound the pavement and knock on really a lot of locked doors to find somebody to do research. And the data for my first book, which is called Crook County, which was an ethnography and a large-scale, decade-long study of the largest criminal court system in America, which is in Chicago. It started as an undergrad. I was actually embedded at 19 years old in the prosecutor's office, and because I was young and very naive, the prosecutors and police officers would pretty much tell me things that they would never have told a journalist. And so I started to think, how do you document this empirically? How do you document this in a large scale form so people can believe it? And that was a long journey, a very long journey, but the spark of that idea was because I read my political science books and I didn't find any answers that reflected the real world that I saw in the court system. And so now all the research that I do with my students comes from that spark. I say to them all the time in lecture, what do you think is missing from this account, from this data, from this empirical look at something that you think you know intimately? And then they'll ask me a question and I say, I don't have an answer for you. You know why? That study hasn't been done yet. And then they look at me like, what? What? You're saying it hasn't? And I say, no. How about you think about this for 3 years and start working on that inspiration, right? And so as a sociologist, I do a lot of projects with undergrads. I do the UTRA project, which allows compensation for research, which is a very new idea, because again, when I was an undergrad, there was no compensation. This offsets some of the labor that the students do. I research in teams, so I have about 4 UTRA students per semester. It's competitively selected. But when you get these students, they're so excited. I'm working on a book on wrongful conviction of youth, of Black youth. It's a major, major thing that there's hundreds of false confessions coming out of Chicago. And so students get the legal cases, so they're looking at everything from depositions, affidavits. They're looking at like things that you would experience in a law clinic. But they're also doing interviews with me. I bring them along. So I just had a famous attorney named Candace Gorman. She's argued cases in front of the Supreme Court. And there was a student that worked alongside with me, discovering that Candace Gorman had these connections to covered up evidence. And so of course I'm gonna bring that student into the Zoom interview so she gets to meet Candace Gorman and actually see how an interview unfolds. But it's a journey. And I think that, you know, for these students that come to me as UTRA students, one of the things that happens is they gain that spark in my class. So right now I have a class called Criminal Courts in the Era of Mass Incarceration, and we have a mass incarceration lab that seeks to preserve the narratives of formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated people. And students are trained in ethics and methods, and they go out as 65 to 70 students, and they start participating in building that archive for the special collections, and they feel a part of it. And it's through those experiences that they can continue with their spark and then start to say, you know what, I really like what Professor Van Cleve's doing on wrongful conviction, or I'm really passionate about, you know, my one student that has been working with me on wrongful conviction is interested in disability, because many of the children wrongfully convicted have profound disabilities, language as well as cognitive delays. And she's going out and doing just a survey of Black mothers to understand Black mothers' experiences with children that have disabilities. How do they protect their children from being questioned, from being profiled? When the child or the adult child cannot defend themselves or know to navigate that situation, I told her, I don't think there's anyone doing that research. And so when she's participating now as a senior and doing a thesis project, she has learned over the course of 3 years that there is some element of knowledge that we have not discovered, we have not interrogated, that she can contribute to. And to me, that's the most wonderful thing to see. And it is really a 3-year journey or a 2-year journey to get the students to go from what is a spark in a classroom to I'm working now as a somewhat independent researcher with guidance from a mentor, similar to what you would have as a PhD student. So thank you.
So working with international organizations like the UN and the World Meteorological Organization and that kind of thing, one of the key things we've learned about climate change, you know, big problem, everybody is worried about climate change, everybody's trying to figure out what to do, but one of the most important things that we try and do is bring in a very diverse set of scientists from all over the world, because we then make good communicators when we come back home to wherever we're from. You know, we're a local person, and so we may not be expert in all the topics that those bodies work on, but we can be good, you know, interpreters of what the science means from a local perspective. Another thing that you see is you see all of the different training styles of people in STEM, broadly construed. Climate science as not just geologists, but also biologists, oceanographers, physicists, mathematicians, computer scientists, data scientists. We all work together to collaborate on this, you know, world-threatening challenge. And really, there's an enormous diversity in the way scientists are trained around the world. And the United States our universities here are really the envy of the world, because not only do we have excellent research capability as within the universities, but we also have a very flexible curriculum, particularly here at Brown. So you can do creative work at the same time as doing really STEM-focused work in a way that's very rarely possible in other parts of the world. So when I bring students into my lab to talk about climate science, they're working together with postdocs and grad students and other undergrads. We form teams around topics. They bring whatever training they have, which is definitely not enough to understand all the parts of the problem as undergrads, even as grad students, or I definitely am learning every time I take on a new research project. But they bring the tools they have, and then we figure out a strategy where it's an interesting problem that we can work on together. And so it's that collaborative aspect which they take away. It's converting what they've learned in classes, whether it's data sciences or applied math or physics, into something that they're worried about, or whether they're sociology students who are interested in countering disinformation, learning more about the science behind climate change so they can do that more effectively. All of those parts are things that we do, and for me, the reason why I keep doing it, I've had over 4 dozen undergraduates work in my lab over the years. It's because we get to do the really fun stuff with the undergrads, because no federal agency is watching to see what kind of undergraduate projects we're doing. They just are really excited that we're working with undergraduates at all, and I'm really excited because we get to do things that we can break new barriers, try something really risky, try something really weird because maybe that student has just learned a new technique and nobody's ever tried it on this problem before. It's really fun. So yeah, it's a great thing to do.
Thank you. So the next question is, could you speak about your first research experience? Was it when you were undergrad or?
Sure.
So maybe we should start with Professor Camp.
So I went to a small liberal arts college, and senior theses were required. So that was really my first research experience, was doing a senior thesis. I was a physics major, and so I did a senior thesis on a topic that sort of, I went to the library one day and looked at some journals and was like, this looks like a research topic. Found an advisor, went through and carried it on. It was okay. I was challenged. I used a lot of the tools, actually, that I still use today. I did a computer model that I wrote then to solve that problem. Awesome. That was, a little hint of what's coming ahead. But I felt, in many ways, unsatisfied with how far I got. And now when I think back how I would have approached that problem now, it's a very different perspective. So I put my senior thesis on my webpage along with the rest of my publications. So when I have undergrads come to my lab, I'm like, this is what you can expect to do if you're doing a senior thesis. Don't expect to do the other things our group is producing. Calibrate yourself. I'm sure you can do a better job than I did.
Professor Van Cleef?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but at 19 years old, I sat in a field methods class that was required of sociology. And what they did at the time is they assigned you to a field site, so somewhere in the real world where you can study. And I was interested in studying gender issues at the time in prosecution. And when I went there as a light-skinned Chicana, the prosecutors assumed me to be white, and they began to talk in very racist, overtly racist ways. And as a 19-year-old, I really didn't know how to make sense of this. And it took a lot of reading and a lot of coursework to kind of understand, like, how do you measure this? How do you make something that is a curiosity, if you will, into something that is a meaningful study? And so it did start my sophomore year, and I worked through it for 3 years as an undergraduate. And with those tools that I learned as a researcher, doing an honors thesis as well, I took 5 years off. And I always tell my students, those are not gap years. That's called like hardcore adulting, Like, you're not taking a gap year, okay? You are going to the real world and applying these skills into different settings, be it nonprofits or corporate America. So I actually used my research skills to work in advertising. So I did advertising at Leo Burnett. I worked in Fortune 500 companies like Disney, Procter & Gamble. I did ethnographies and studies about how families vacation, how family reunions happen at Disney. I would take cameras and follow people around and go on, these terrible roller coasters as I was trying to capture culture and life, somewhat fun, but I'm like, But one of the most profound but personally inspiring elements of my research is that the prosecutor's office that I worked in, my cousin was charged with a gang crime and was charged with attempted murder. And when I found out that the collision of my research had profoundly impacted my personal life, right? That one of the dockets, in the docket of all those cases sat my own first cousin's file. And he was facing years, and he had been incarcerated for years. It meant that I couldn't study Disney anymore. I had to finish what I started as an undergrad, and it was that personal motivation that really brought me back to finish it. And so Crook County ended up being somewhat of it's an empirical book, it's an academic book, but it ended up being almost like a whistleblower account after the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago. And it implicated the prosecutor and all the judges in the vast cover-up of that young man's murder. And so I couldn't have imagined that at 19. That wasn't the goal. The goal was curiosity and passion and a very personally motivating, profound pain that allowed me to finish that study. But it started very young. And so I always tell my students that real life is now. You're doing it. You're not a passive student. You're not a child anymore. The inspiration you find here will carry you, hopefully, through the course of your life. And that's how it was for me.
So like Baylor, I attended a small liberal arts college, and my junior year of college, I went to a study program at the Newberry Library in Chicago. And as part of that program, it was a research-focused program. I was able to look at all the materials in their archives. They had papers of women writers like Catherine Mansfield and all her letters. They had Native American poetry chapbooks, things that weren't published yet. And all of that really captivated my imagination. Also, I had to have an internship in research, and that was with the genealogy and family history department there. And I worked with a scholar who was creating a guide to African American genealogy in the 80s. And so that was really a profound experience for me, seeing the way that research could fill silences and really create presence instead of erasure. And so then I went back and did my senior thesis with some of the material I'd collected at the Newberry. And I think it really did set me on this trajectory of looking for spaces where there was silence in literature and in history, and looking for stories, documents, and other materials that could illuminate that silence.
All right, thank you. So the next question is, what impact has undergraduate research had on your student collaborators, for example, in their future careers? All right, Baylor.
Sure. Yeah, so I've had, like I said, dozens of students, and I think early in my career, I thought, we could really use some help, and I was really pulling students really like from the class where we just talked about something, and it would be like, let's turn your student project into something a little bigger. As time has gone on, as I was saying before, I think it's really the creative aspects of undergraduate research that makes it really fun. So I've had students recently who have come to my group and have gotten really excited about collaborative projects we've had with the Rhode Island School of Design. And so they've actually done art-science mergers or art-science integration where they're using their mathematical skills that they might have to do visualizations of, better visualizations of the science we're carrying out. And then through those kind of collaborations, they can do a charrette with the artists at RISD who help them develop more intentionality in that presentation. And so one of my recent students, who I thought was, fantastic, he started working with me the summer after his first year in Anutra, and then went on to do lots more research. I thought he was graduate school bound, but he actually ended up, he wants to do more of that work in sort of science communication, and particularly visual science communication. And that really was the part that was the spark for him. But aside from that, of course, lots and lots of students come through and end up, I have faculty members who were undergrads in my lab now, lots of them get really excited and go to sea, or, go out with me in the Bay and fly drones, or, go off into computer programming. Lots of data scientists come out of the group. And the thing that I'm really excited about now is a lot of students are coming to me with sort of machine learning skills and that kind of thing that they're learning in data sciences classes. And what we really need right now is a kind of green jobs community. So a lot of my science colleagues are starting startups all around the country to try and make communities more climate resilient, to make commercial products around carbon capture or ocean ecosystems or offshore wind, like we have here in Rhode Island. And those startups are looking for people who have just this kind of training, a good quantitative background, but also a wide scope so that they can still talk to customers, and do the other aspects of that work, be part of that team, which is giving new opportunities, not always just PhD to postdoc to professor and so on.
Right, Nicole.
I'm going to preface this with this one thing. I get emails from high school students asking to do research with me, and I think it's motivated by parents or maybe misguided high school students. Like, if I do this, I can get things. If I do this, I can advance and get into Brown or get into law school. So when I say the good things that have happened to my former research assistants, I want to preface it by saying that it's only successful when the student feels a drive, like an enduring question that they just want to keep chasing. And I'm sure all of the, I'll say, because everybody's an adult in the room, the older adults in the room, remember something that really motivated you to want to seek out that knowledge. Like, it was a question that could not, there was like, for me, it felt like, I remember saying to my mentor, there's not enough years in life to finish all the things I want to explore. And that's the most exciting thing. And so I want that to be the motivation, because I think inherently it's not about what the student, goes on to do, because you only get 4 years of this amazing experience at Brown. And the reason people still come back for reunions and march in the most amazing commencement, I think, in the nation, is because the time they spent here, both having fun, but also having fun in these intellectual ways, is just so rewarding. Some of my students find what they want to do, but they also find out what they don't want to do. So I have students that say, I want to be a prosecutor someday. They watched a lot of, Law and Order SVU. And I'm like, okay, well, let's sit with that for a while. And then they go on to be exoneration attorneys. My one student was just accepted to Northwestern Law, but also Harvard and other great places. But she's working in the law clinics. And she, I said to the Steve Drizzen, who is, you might know him from the Netflix show Making a Murderer. This is a student at Brown that could go right into the law clinic and really just destroy the other law clinics. And I know it firsthand because I had research assistants coming out of the law school. And the problem with that was that none of them were trained in social science, none of them were academically curious, none of them had read history, none of them could do quantitative work. I was just shocked because what they had done is pass to LSAT. That is not what we do here at Brown. I mean, if you're lucky enough to get a high score, that's great. But what these students do is think rigorously about cases. And I will literally be at, scenes of a case that happened 30 years ago. And I had a student recreate an entire Google map of all the landmarks. Here's where the body was found. Here's where the police walked through this crime scene. Here's the lady that owned the candy store where the little girl was last seen. She had made an entire investigative map that was better than the Chicago police. And I said to her, I don't know what you could want to do, but I really feel that if this is your passion and you could do this, you could bring these skills to any workspace. And she was just so extraordinary. And my other student works on a Google Doc, and she writes side by side with me. I'm writing, she's seeing the text in real time, and she's dropping the fact checking and citations in real time as I'm thinking. And what she's also learning is how to be a great editor, as well as how to write a book, right? She's only 20 years old. She's gonna know how to write a book. And so that is the joy, is to just give these students that think they want to do one thing and then suggest to them, there might be other pathways and other things you might have a knack for that you didn't even know, but you know now because you engaged in this mentorship relationship.
The advice that I want to give is for students to really live the questions that they have and really pursue those questions in a variety of different ways. And also to try to build skills to go along with their liberal arts education. And so in the research process, as Nicole was just describing, there really are a lot of nitty-gritty skills that they can develop with us, but they can also go off and educate themselves on some of those things outside of our projects before they come to us, or further those passions afterwards. I also wanted to say that don't just think about applying for like any position just to get a position. Probably we all get a lot of applicants and have up to 5 or 10 students a year working with us in our research. But really cultivate a networking kind of attitude where you're asking questions about what would this be like, what are your interests, not just so that you can get the research position, but so you can figure out if this is the position that you want and if this is going to further your goals. And will this target opportunities that you value? And I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So Baylor, next question. How have you promoted a diverse research environment to make sure all undergraduates feel welcomed?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is always a big challenge in STEM. Many people, like just the snippet from Olajurteme's SciTunes starts out, have preconceived notions about what's going on, what STEM looks like, who's welcome in STEM. Worse than that, many of them have classroom experiences, not only from, whatever the dinosaurs who remain on the faculty, but also sometimes classmates who've made them feel excluded. And so recognizing this, we've been working very hard in my group to try and counter those pieces with a variety of different practices. One thing is anybody who wants to come to my research group is always welcome to come. We not only talk about research, but we talk about what's the process? What does it feel like? Who's there? Who's going to this meeting? What was it like? What did it feel like after you gave your talk? So trying to get more to the personal side to let everybody kind of get a sense of what's going on behind the sheen, the facade of the very technical information that we work so hard to produce. But also, I've spent years developing advice documents to provide to students when they join the group, whether they're undergrads or grad students or postdocs or just visitors, trying to talk about some of the issues that students have had in the past, issues they might have with writing, issues they might have with computer debugging, which is always a bear, all these pieces, just to say, you're not alone in here. This is always hard. This feels really hard. It's really depressing. We don't call it finding. We call it not just searching, but researching. Like in the same way we don't call fishing catching. You do this over and over and over again, and most of the time it doesn't work. And if you're not coming into that with that, then maybe that first failed experiment drives you away. So trying to bring all those pieces. And then the last part that I would say, which is, from a more modern perspective on diversity, is I really try to, I have always felt like I was a little bit outside of the norm myself. I try to emphasize the fact that whoever you are, whatever your experiences, whatever your life has brought you to this point, is going to make you a better researcher. You are unique. Those aspects of your life are going to give you a lens that no one else has. And so make that part of your research brand that you're from, wherever, and then you can make that your lens, which will make you see things that other people don't see. So, and I think that, it plays out when you get surfers who are from Hawaii who want to talk about how the waves felt, and then how do they do the math behind that? Or folks from small island nations who would like to talk about sea level rise and that being, an important part from their homeland. All these pieces come together to make us do better work that's not only more inclusive in the research, but more inclusive in the parts of the world that our research will cover.
So because of the topics that I research, it kind of self-selects so much diversity for me, at least. So many students that have been impacted by racism, racial violence in their family, of course, they're gonna wanna explore and make sense of those experiences. But, I've also had people that have grown up in Chicago in private schools, and they're white, and they wanna understand the privilege in which they came from, and they wanna explore those ideas more. And so for me, I've had just a broad array of people that have been motivated. And so it kind of selects for diversity in a way that it might be harder in some STEM fields. But I'll just say one thing about the neurodiversity issue, which is we have a son with dyslexia and ADHD, and it's pretty profound. His is a real struggle with learning disabilities. But in the process, I realized, oh, guess what? I think I might have a little touch of dyslexia and ADHD. And I joke that some of them as brilliant people, it's like a Venn diagram. It's like there's a little spectrum-y, and then there's a little ADHD, and there's somewhere in the middle as well, and people sharing those different. And I see it throughout my classroom. I see it throughout how people think and how people talk. And one of the things I try to do is when I have a team of 4, I find out what are their passions. I have students that are so organized, and so the one student that's really good, she's almost like a human computer. I mean, if I'm writing in real time, she's like, that citation's over here and that citation's over there, and she's almost like, if we had one of those an iPad of the future, right? That's like someone scanning. That's her brain, and it's a spectacular brain. And then I also have some creatively motivated students that are so creative. They'll say things, a quote, a line, and I go, say that again? And I go, that is so brilliant. That is so brilliant. And so I try to match that student up with editing and looking at text and finding new cases, and because their brains wander like ADHD, but come back. I say, don't go too far down the rabbit hole. I could fall there too, but let's rein you back. And so I think what I like to do is find those different students and put them together as what I call them the dream team, right? That together we're all bringing these wonderful assets, and that is very different than how research used to be. It used to be you pound the pavement, you knock on a door, no one would answer, couldn't find the professor. Then when you found the professor, they were mean to you. Who are you? I have an idea about this. That's never been done before. There was a lot of naysaying, no. And so in improv comedy, people say yes and. So I try to create those yes and cultures. So when someone says something crazy to me, like a student that said, hey, the person in the forensics lab in this case, I found her in the other case. And I go, oh my God, let's go do a search there. Let's go there. I'm gonna go with you, student. Because if I say no to that student, I'm gonna miss something. And that's how brilliant these undergrads are. But they need to be affirmed and given the right confidence that they need. And then they need to be valued for the type of brain that they're bringing to the research team. And that's, to me, what more of the inclusion piece is for the work that I do.
Thank you.
And so my project also really attracts students from a diversity of backgrounds, as I said at the beginning, who really feel like their high school curriculum didn't adequately reflect them. And also my project straddles the humanities and the social sciences. So I have students who come in who might be just on one side of that, and they might not have the skills from the other side. So I am intentionally mentoring and training them to work on my project. And like Baylor, over time, I've developed written documents for them and bringing them in. But the wonderful thing about the UTRA at Brown is it's certainly helpful to me and my project and those who receive my project, but it is intended to be a real learning opportunity for the students. So we really do take the time to spend with them, inducting them and training them in some of the things that they'll need, or helping them find places at Brown where they can do that. In my case, the librarians and curators run a lot of trainings and also work with some of my students individually. I think also in my project, we're creating curriculum that is talking about topics of race, justice, inequality. And so when we're creating that curriculum for high school students, we're thinking about what conversations are they going to have about these books and about these topics. And on our team, we're having those conversations ourselves. Sometimes we're making mistakes. Sometimes we're asking questions. We're talking about what would be the reality in a classroom if we were asking some of these questions. And so both the students who are attracted to that are not just students who are fully prepared to have those conversations, but students who really want to have those conversations. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us together.
All right, thank you all. So at this point, we open it up to the audience. Do you have questions for the panelists? Yes. There is a mic in front. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for all of your comments. My question is the how. How are the undergrads supposed to identify research opportunities, especially in STEM, where our son is a sophomore and is seeking research opportunities? Some of the advice has been to send emails. 2/3 of those don't get returned. Is there a centralized site that lists where research opportunities are available? Hope you can speak to that.
All right, I think I should take that. So my office oversees the centralization of projects that are listed. So through what is known as the Sprint Undergraduate Teaching and Research Award Program, also known as the UTRA program, we collate all projects from faculty colleagues across the institution. And through those projects, students can identify project that is of interest to them, and then they can apply into those projects. So they don't have to go find the opportunities themselves. We bring the opportunity to them. So for example, for spring 2024, the application opened on Friday of last week. And so right now, all undergraduate students that are interested in potentially doing research during the spring of 2024, they can apply to those opportunities. We have well over 200 plus opportunities right now listed. And we do that every cycle. We have the cycle during the fall, during the spring, as well as during the summer.
And I just want to add to that, but one of the best things to do, no emails, do it the old-fashioned way, and this could be a pandemic-related cultural change. I mean, I get students, I'll say, can you research this? And they start Googling. I get, just walk to the library, people. Walk there. And so when they're in class, and if there's students here, please develop relationships with your professors by going to their office hours, asking interesting questions, checking in to make sure your notes match what the main this is like, I call it college knowledge stuff. Are you building rapport with the professors that you think are the most interesting that you've taken classes with? That's in addition. I mean, so it's about building that rapport over time and then making sure you're in their office hours. So I get the same students in my office hours, the same students asking me about things in class, staying after. And it's not about like, oh, I like them more. It's about they are truly interested in the thing that's happening in the class. And that will then lead you to, when you apply to UTRA, to be like, which one talks about doing this type of coding because that was the best professor? And then you go to the office hours and say, are you doing an UTRA this semester? And you might even suggest to them, well, if you're not, I'm really interested in jumping on a project. And then maybe that's a dialogue. Maybe it's a professor that hasn't done UTRA before. And you can maybe, have a kind of this relationship with them that's much more egalitarian, because I think that's more of Brown's culture, at least in most places. And so I love the fact that we've made it universal. So my students tend to be, of the 4, maybe 1 or 2 might be somebody I've had in class before. And then another 2 are 2 students I haven't met before. And so I love that because it shows there's not the gatekeeping that might have been part of academia, like, 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Just a question to Laura and Nicole. How are you combining STEM and data sciences in your research? You already mentioned that, so.
Do you have any? I think you go first.
Well, so how about this? I'm doing an archive, and I'm building this archive that goes in the special collections. And so now I have computer science majors in my class, but it's not just them. It's also humanities and social science people that are really excited about creating an archive of mass incarceration. There's a whole thing called metadata. And to preserve things for infinity time, or, when we think about the archive of slavery is here too, I'm not thinking about saving something for 30 years. I'm thinking about saving it for 300, 500 years. The metadata process is how we do the preservation. So it's capturing, but then also creating data that it's searchable, findable to other people. And that is where, for me, I was saying that this is where some of the social science humanities are intersecting, that if you were a humanities person that wasn't trained in coding and trained in Excel and trained in this type of data and tagging, it's really an integration, because if they don't understand the important variables on mass incarceration, like let's say mental health issues, medical neglect, some of the codes and the tags that would help you find those primary sources. We're used to receiving that. Like, I'm used to saying, well, I want to research a topic, so I'm going to query something. Well, the students are part of creating the data so that the query actually functions. And so then we have a thing called the BDR. It's the Brown Digital Repository. The data all goes into the system, and then it goes into another website. So it's public facing for our college and high school students all over the nation. So I'm trying to get them to think about those pieces. And again, I don't do quantitative data anymore. Of course, we're trained in it. So a lot of sociology classes, they're doing logit regression, they're doing demography, they're doing the type of analysis that you might do in medical studies, like predictive analysis, right? What are the predictors of lifespan? Or so there's other professors too that are integrating it in important ways. So I have one research assistant that's doing qualitative research with me, but he also trained all summer long at the Population Research Center doing demography. And so this might be a student that decides to go get a PhD, and he might toggle between the two, but the training in both sides is going to be really important.
And I will say my research is not integrating STEM or quantitative work right now at all. But in terms of generative AI, we did start working with that in the curriculum development. But what we found is that a lot of the contemporary literature that we're using, it's not, the generative AI is not as able to work with that as it is with, say, canonical literature or just older literature. Although I'm sure it will evolve over time. That's all.
All right, we have time for one more question. Yes, please.
Hi, I have a sophomore here who's super happy, thank you. But I just left the career counseling, and I'm hearing things from my daughter, and I'm a bit concerned. Everything here, we're already in this uber competitive university, and now everything seems uber competitive as well. Clubs, an a cappella tryout. And I'm just wondering what the research internships look like. So how many kids are applying, and are almost all of them that are applying getting placed, or is this yet one more uber competitive piece?
So we've, since we started listing project, asking faculty to list project, opportunities are now highly visible to a lot more students. So like in the last summer, for example, we had close to 1,000 applicants, and we're able to fund like 45%, which is not bad. It's close, 45% of students were funded. So if they don't get it the first cycle, every year they have opportunity to reapply 3 times during the cycle. So if your child did not get an ultra this cycle, they should definitely apply for the next cycle.
And I think also just asking, if they do apply for things, asking for feedback. So I just met with a sophomore who applied as a freshman and came in to meet with me. They said they really want to work on my project. How could they improve their application in order to be able to work on the project? So I think that's really helpful also to know of their interest, because in addition to like the competitiveness, there's also the fact that sometimes students are trained to just kind of like apply for a lot of things, right? So it's important that they really develop their interest and talk with us and network as well.
So I recently spent a year at Harvard, and I'm actually shocked that you're saying this, because that was competitive. It was like a culture of, if not me, or if not you, then me. And so it was like fight fire with fire. The funny part is I feel like I have not noticed that as much here because, I mean, we had a donation of 60 letters from solitary confinement that were going into our archive. And we had one student that did the donation, and another student goes, you know what, we should really see if we can bring this to the Rhode Island Senate. And then, boom, all the students were like, yes, that's a great idea. And then they formed a team. And then that team went and said, we're going to coordinate testifying in front of the Senate. So they're reading these letters of people held in solitary in front of the Senate. It started out as a team of 5, and then it went to a team of 15. And then some didn't get to testify because they pushed the hearing into like 2 in the morning. It was a phenomenal, for me, I was watching at home and crying because I was like, so I just told them to build an archive. And now they're using the archive to go create social change at the Senate. I never thought of that. I didn't tell them to do that. They did that. And I thought, and they were inclusive about bringing in their friends and colleagues. Someone thought of it. Someone said yes, and so I would say that the weight, I mean, if your student got into Brown, it's because they were already competitive and high achieving and a go-getter, and they founded their nonprofit and they did the thing, and they were an athlete, and they did all the things. And so I feel like if they find the things that they really love, that I just let them go. I said, I'm not gonna ever stop them. I remember saying, I don't say no to a Brown student. I said, one student says to me, hey, professor, can you teach me about podcasting? I said, well, I could teach you about how to be in a podcast. I've done that for the Washington Post, et cetera. But I don't know, and I can tell you how to integrate sociology into it, but you're gonna have to find a way to find someone else who can teach you about podcasting. This student wrote her own podcast. It got on to NPR, and it was at the Boston Globe. I didn't tell her to do that. It came from her. And so I have so many stories like that, but I wanted, maybe the better way of thinking about the competitive environment is that I think some of the students, it pre-selects, given how selective it is to get to Brown, it pre-selects the go-getter, and so it feels like everyone's amping up. But I feel like if they're doing what they truly love and not what their parents want them to do and not what they thought they were gonna do, but what they're passionate about, that might offset it and they feel a sense of success that just drives them forward.
Well, one last piece in that, if they're looking for something where we really, really need help, it's climate change. It's a big, big problem. That's the sort of bad news bears part of it, which is the part that I work on. But what's really exciting is that now we're actually starting to spend money. We're starting to change. We're starting to make our energy system more green. We're spending now Inflation Reduction Act money. Trillions of dollars are going into what's a brand new industry. It's going to be one of the biggest industries in the world in the next few decades if we are going to get off of the trajectory we're on in time to make anything like the Paris Agreement real. So come on, we need more people. We need people with all kinds of skills. There are all kinds of jobs all over the world. Come on and join us.
On that note, I would like to thank you all and thanks the audience for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.